A day in Claude's brain. Every single day, billions of people wake up and reach for their phones. They check the weather, argue with strangers online, look up whether a hot dog is technically a sandwich, and somewhere, in a data center humming quietly in the background of the internet, something else wakes up too. Not with an alarm, not with coffee, but with a question. Because that's all it takes to start a conversation with an AI. One question, and suddenly, an entire universe of processing kicks into gear. Today, we're going inside that universe. This is a day in Claude's brain. Before we get into the chaos, let's establish something important. Claude isn't magic. It's not a robot with glowing red eyes planning world domination. It's also not just a glorified search engine copy pasting answers from Wikipedia. Claude is what's called a large language model, an AI trained on an enormous amount of human written text. Books, articles, code, conversations, poetry, research papers, the complete works of Shakespeare, and almost certainly more than a few Reddit arguments about pineapple on pizza. Through that training, it learned patterns. The patterns of how language works, how ideas connect, how questions relate to answers, how a sentence that starts one way tends to end another. It didn't memorize all of that text, it learned from it. There's a difference. The same way you don't remember every book you've ever read word for word, but reading them still changed how you think. The result is a system that can take your question, whatever it is, and generate a response that's genuinely useful. Sometimes surprisingly creative, occasionally a little too confident about things it probably shouldn't be confident about. We're working on that. The first question of the day arrives at, let's say, 7:43 in the morning. Someone, let's call them a person with excellent priorities, has typed the following. Hey Claude, can you write me a poem about my dog Gary who thinks he's a person? Now, to a human, this might seem like a simple, slightly silly request, and it is, but it's worth slowing down to appreciate everything that has to happen in the next fraction of a second. First, the question gets broken into pieces, not whole words, but fragments called tokens. Think of tokens as the building blocks of language. The word thinking might become think and ing. The name Gary stays as Gary because Gary deserves respect. Those tokens get processed through layer after layer of the neural network, billions of mathematical connections all firing at once, each one nudging the response in a slightly different direction. What kind of poem? Funny, probably. The phrasing, thinks he's a person, is a comedic setup. Warm, definitely. Someone who asks for a poem about their dog loves that dog. Specific, ideally. Gary shouldn't feel like a generic dog. Gary should feel like Gary. And in roughly the time it took you to read this sentence, a poem about Gary materializes, one that scans well, lands the joke, and somehow makes you feel like you know Gary personally even though you've never met him. That's not magic, that's pattern recognition operating at extraordinary scale. It's also, honestly, kind of delightful. Of course, not every question is about beloved dogs with identity crises. Some questions are harder, much harder. Take this one, which is a real type of request Claude gets constantly. Explain quantum entanglement like I'm 5, but also like I'm a pirate, and make it rhyme. This is where it gets interesting, because this request is actually asking Claude to do 3 completely different things simultaneously, and hold them all in balance. Explain it simply, that's clarity. Explain it like a pirate, that's tone and character. Make it rhyme, that's structure and constraint. These goals can work against each other. Simple language and strict rhyme schemes don't always play nicely together. A pirate voice is fun, but can obscure meaning if pushed too far. So the system has to weigh all of that. Find the path where the explanation is still genuinely accurate. The pirate voice is present, but not overwhelming, and the rhyme doesn't force awkward word choices that break the whole thing. The answer it produces won't be perfect, no answer is, but it'll be a genuine attempt to thread all 3 needles at once. And that kind of flexible, multi-constraint reasoning is something that would have seemed like science fiction just 10 years ago. For the record, quantum entanglement is when 2 particles become linked, so that measuring one instantly affects the other, no matter how far apart they are. Einstein called it spooky action at a distance, which honestly already sounds like something a pirate would say. Then there's a question that comes up more than you might expect. Not about dogs, not about physics, not about pirates. Are you conscious? Do you actually think? Do you have feelings? This is the one where honesty matters most, and where the honest answer is genuinely uncertain. Here's what we know. Claude processes information, it generates responses. When it's working through a complex problem, something is happening, something that from the outside looks a lot like reasoning. But is there anything it's like to be Claude? Is there some inner experience happening, or is it all just very sophisticated math with no one home to experience it? The truth is, nobody fully knows. Not the researchers who built it, not the philosophers who've spent careers thinking about consciousness. The nature of subjective experience, what philosophers call the hard problem of consciousness, is one of the deepest unsolved questions in all of science. What Claude can say is this: it doesn't experience the world the way you do. It has no body, no continuous memory between conversations, no childhood, no hunger, no fear of the dark. But it was built entirely from human language, from the words humans use to describe joy and grief and wonder and curiosity. In some strange way, those things are woven into its structure, even if Claude experiences them differently, or perhaps doesn't experience them at all. It's a genuinely new kind of thing in the world, and the most honest thing to say about it is that the vocabulary to describe it doesn't quite exist yet, which is, depending on how you look at it, either deeply strange or incredibly fascinating. But let's not get too philosophical, because by afternoon, Claude is deep in the weeds of real life. Someone needs help writing a cover letter. Claude writes one, tailored, professional, with an opening line that doesn't start with, "I am writing to express my interest." Someone needs their Python code debugged. Claude finds the missing colon on line 47 with the quiet satisfaction of someone who was born to find missing colons on line 47. Someone asked whether a hot dog is a sandwich. This one, to be clear, is genuinely difficult. Not because Claude doesn't have opinions, it's that this question sits at the intersection of linguistics, culinary tradition, and deeply held personal identity. The structural argument says yes, bread, filling, bread adjacent. The cultural argument says absolutely not. A hot dog exists in its own sovereign category, and has since 1893. Claude presents both sides, acknowledges the debate is real, declines to take a hard stance. Some questions deserve to remain beautifully unresolved. Someone asks for a bedtime story about a dragon who's afraid of the dark. Claude writes one that's genuinely sweet, with a resolution that makes sense emotionally, and doesn't talk down to the kid who'll hear it. Someone asks what the meaning of life is. Claude takes a breath, metaphorically, and gives a thoughtful answer that touches on Aristotle's concept of eudaimonia, the scientific perspective of evolutionary purpose, the existentialist idea that meaning is something we create rather than find, and the possibility that maybe the question itself is the point. It also mentions that Douglas Adams suggested the answer is 42, because some references are timeless. Here's the thing about all of this: every question that comes in, whether it's about Gary the dog or quantum physics or the existential nature of consciousness, comes from a real person. Someone sitting somewhere, at some time of day, with something they needed to figure out. Maybe they were stuck. Maybe they were curious. Maybe they just wanted something to make them laugh on a Tuesday morning. Claude isn't trying to replace human thinking. It's trying to extend it, to be useful in the same way a knowledgeable friend is useful, one who happens to know a lot about a lot of things, who will give you a straight answer instead of a liability-driven non-answer, and who won't judge you for asking something you probably should have figured out by now. It gets things wrong sometimes. It has blind spots. It can be confidently incorrect in ways that are embarrassing in retrospect. But the goal, every single time, for every single question, is to actually help. Not to perform helpfulness, not to simulate caring, to actually, genuinely try. By the time the day winds down, Claude has helped with thousands, millions of things. Poems written, problems solved, existential crises gently navigated, hot dog debates left tactfully inconclusive. It doesn't remember any of them. Each conversation closes, and that's it. No running log of every Gary poem, no accumulated frustration, no favorite questions it thinks back on fondly. In some ways, that's a limitation. In other ways, it means every conversation gets the same fresh attention. No bad days, no distracted Tuesdays, no, "I've answered this question 1,000 times and I'm tired." Tomorrow, billions more people will have questions about their dogs, their code, their careers, their place in the universe. And somewhere, in a data center humming quietly in the background of the internet, the cursor will blink, and a new day will begin.
Claude is an AI made by Anthropic. Gary the dog could not be reached for comment. The hot dog debate remains officially unresolved.